If you would state your name and also the year that your birth date.
Okay, I was born on September the 26th, 1922.
All right.
I'll be 88 years old in September. It's
Okay.
coming September.
Okay. And then also state your name.
My name is Carl McPherson.
All right.
I'm a graduate of Bremen High School, and I'm a lifelong resident, I guess you'd say, of Bremen. I was born and raised here. My family's been here for years and years.
Okay.
And I guess you'd say my family's one of the pioneers around here. After Harrison County broke off from Carroll County.
And I wanted to ask, do we have your permission to do this interview with you and tape it on video?
As far as I'm concerned, you have my permission. I'd be glad to cooperate with you any way I can.
All right. We appreciate it. Thank you. Tell us, just to set the stage a little bit, tell us what Bremen was like when your first memories of what Bremen was like.
Oh, Lordy. Well, my first memories of Bremen was, I guess you'd say, that everything was a dirt road. And even 27, US 27 was a dirt road. And I recall, just barely, when they paved US 78, I do remember when it was a dirt road. And that was really a big thing when they paved it. And all the city streets around Bremen were dirt. And the main drag, which was Tallapoosa Street, you know how most of the business district, other than the little area over there on Buchanan Street, but I remember mostly that Hoss Meeks, he was the mayor then. He was the editor of the Bremen Gateway, and he was the mayor. And they pictured a half wit. They had, every town had somebody that's a little bit shorter memory of mine. They had him out there with a fishing pole, showed it. And fishing, because the holes in the road, it's rain, they couldn't get through that way. He went out there and fished, on Main Street. Well, finally they got all the roads paved, and I guess the other thing I remember most was up in front of Cancel Jewelry's. They had a well, a public well, where they had the troughs, and they fed the horses, come into town. I remember that very well.
Was there electricity then?
Yeah, there was electricity, I believe there was. Now, it was owned by Manville Mills, I believe, the first power plant, and Bremen bought it. And a fellow named Henry Walker, he worked for Georgia Power for years and years and years. He started it back, he must not have been over 16 or 17 years old when he went to work with his private electrical company. And he continued on with West Georgia up until he retired.
Okay.
That's my first best memories of Bremen, and I guess I must have been 7 or 8 years old. I lived over there on Gordon Street, which was naturally an unpaved road. And the cars had a hard time coming up the street, that Gordon, the post where the post office is. They'd get stuck down there and slide off the road, coming up that road, because it was a dirt road.
Okay.
But it was funny, but I enjoyed it. I didn't know anybody, nobody else did.
What is your first memory of Tom Murphy?
I would say probably around 1933 or 34. I was in the 3rd grade, and Tom was a year younger than I was, and he was in the 2nd grade. And I became acquainted with Tom then, and for a long time we were inseparable. We played together as children. We played baseball together, different things.
Did you know his family well?
Yeah, I knew his father was named Mr. Bill Murphy, and he was a freight agent here for the Central of Georgia. I never will forget Tom telling me how much he made one year. He said he made $80 a month. What But my mother worked down at Sewell's, and she was only making $9 a week, so that was pretty good. And, you know, I was raised up during the Depression, and so was Tom. I mean, Tom, he knew all about the Depression. But it was some hard times back. But it didn't know anybody, so it didn't really affect me because I was a child.
Did you know Tom's brothers?
Oh, I knew James very well. James was he had a brilliant mind. He didn't graduate from the University of Georgia, but he attended law school over there. And back then, you know, you could take the bar before you finished law school, but now you can't. But James passed the bar, and he came out here and he developed arthritis real bad. He had a bad case of arthritis. And all of his life he was crippled. And so he didn't graduate at the University of Georgia, but he came out here to Bremen and he practiced out of his home up here on Gordon Street. That was James's place.
Did Tom ever talk to you about his brother, James?
Well, of course, being a resident of Bremen and knowing both of them, you know, I talked with James independent of Tom because James was more interested, he became very interested in federal taxation, which included trust, wills, and estates. And Tom was more of a general practitioner. So I was acquainted with federal taxes too. That was my main job. And James and I talked a lot. But Tom, I don't think ever really got involved in federal taxation.
You mentioned that you and Tom, seems like y'all were friends.
Yeah.
What kind of things would you do things together?
Oh yeah, Tom, when we were in the Boy Scouts together, and Mr. George Turner was a scoutmaster, and we participated in, you know, spending overnight out, you know, generally what Boy Scouts did. Because every boy in Bremen practically was a Boy Scout. There wasn't anything else to do. That was about the only activity it was around Bremen at that time, was the Boy Scouts. And Mr. George Turner was a scoutmaster, and he was a real fine fellow. And Tom, we would go together, you know, camp out, you know, over the weekend. And then I never will forget one time that to become a first-class scout, you had to have a 14-mile hike. And we got somebody to judge how far 7 miles was. And Tom was familiar with the railroad. He had some kinfolks out there somewhere called 48. I don't know what that meant. But anyway, Tom and I, we walked out there and then turned around and walked back. That qualified us for the 14-mile hike.
Did you do
it?
We
walked the railroad. That was the pitiful part. And you know, walking the railroad's hard work. I mean, but we had a lot of fun together. The most memorable thing I remember about Tom, I don't think he'd object me telling it, but we were down at Camp Waco. The scout camp was having a little overnight camp out, and it was on Friday night, and it went through Saturday, and we came back Sunday afternoon. Well, Tom had always gone to the movie every Saturday to see a serial. They used to have a little serial that they played, you know, and you had to come back every week to get, you know, because they'd leave you right in the middle of the story, you know. And Tom went to George Turner. I guess he must have been about 12 years old, or 13, somewhere in there. But anyway, George didn't, and see that Camp Waco was about 3 miles south of Waco, and then 2 more miles to Bremen. That's 5 miles. Well, Miss Turner didn't think that he ought to walk, you know, that far. But Tom had a record of going to see every one of those shows, and it was really a big thing for him. Well, Miss Turner, being responsible, you know, for all of us, he didn't give Tom permission. And Tom just cried like the mischief. I'll never will forget that. That's funny.
So he had to miss it that week.
Ma'am?
He had to miss that Saturday.
Yeah, that's right. That tore him up.
Yeah. What type of personality did he have as a boy?
Well, Tom was always very friendly, very congenial. He was, I know Mr. Hammond, Mr. H.D. Hatchett was superintendent of the schools, and this was back when, when they, felt free to discipline the children by spanking them in school. But Tom always prided himself in the fact that Mr. Hatchett never whipped him. Of course, it might have been the fact that his daddy was on the school board, So, Mr. Hatchett didn't go around making the school board members mad. But a lot of people, welcomed the fact that Mr. Hatchett would, switch them and get out of line.
Yeah.
But on the whole, Tom was a very congenial person. He had a lot of friends, and I guess you'd call him my best friend when we were young. Of course, we grew up and moved apart a little. Tom married and had a family. I was over at the University of Georgia with him, and he had it rough over there. I mean, he lived down there. Well, everybody had it rough. I keep saying rough. It was acceptable because nobody knew any better.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the rough times. Tell me what was hard about it.
Oh, God, I guess it's rough time. Well, I said, back then, when we were in school, they didn't have any cafeteria at school. And so everybody was responsible for, bringing their own lunch. And Mr. Matthews had a little store up there, and they sold moon pies and knee-high drinks. And my mother would always give me a dime to eat lunch. And so a moon pie cost a dime, a nickel, and a knee-high cost a nickel, those little big strawberries, And I guess that was the way, nobody had nothing. I mean, it was just, now Tom lived right there at the school. So he lived about four doors down from the school. So he always went home for lunch. But a lot of people, that lived out, brought their own lunch. And that was a hard time. But I know everybody had an old milk cow, inside the city limits or anywhere else. We lived over on Gordon Street, right above the Baptist church, and right across where the Methodist church was. And we carried, the kids, they could go walk home wood. But God, there was some terrible time. But as I say about that old cow, we kept an old milk cow out there tied to a pine tree out there, and we milked that cow. And my mother would often, cook just cornmeal mush, cornmeal and butter. We had an old cow and sweet milk, that'd make a good supper. Sometimes eat it 7 days a week. But we had plenty of energy. I didn't see it was so bad. But it was tough, compared to what it is today.